Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep into the legal world. It's a fascinating look at how a global law firm is really embracing neurodiversity and the ripple effect it's having on the whole industry. But before we dive into the specifics, I think it would be good to level set for our listeners. When we talk about neurodiversity, what exactly are we talking about?
Yeah, that's a really important point to clarify. When we say neurodiversity, we're talking about the concept that neurological differences,
Mhm.
like those associated with autism,
Yeah.
ADHD, dyslexia, and others, these are normal variations in the human brain, not deficits. It's about recognizing and valuing those differences as strengths, not weaknesses.
Right. So it's kind of moving away from that old fix-it mentality and instead embracing those unique perspectives and talents that individuals bring to the table. So how does this all play out in a high-pressure, demanding field like law?
That's where things get really interesting. You see, for a long time, there's been this unspoken assumption that to be a successful lawyer, you need to conform to a certain mold. Think sharp suits, smooth talking, and a knack for navigating those complex social situations.
Yeah, and that can be incredibly challenging, if not impossible. For many neurodivergent individuals, it's really no wonder that historically they've been underrepresented in the legal profession.
Exactly. But what we're seeing now is a real shift in thinking. And Freshfields is at the forefront of this movement. They've recognized that neurodiversity isn't just about ticking a box. It's about tapping into this vast pool of untapped talent and creating a truly inclusive workplace where everyone can thrive.
Okay, so let's get into what Freshfields is actually doing. I know they have this Neurodiversity Working Group, the NWG, but it didn't all start there, did it? This case study we're looking at mentions someone named James Smither, who seems to be key in all of this.
Absolutely. James, the head of risk management at Freshfields, actually co-founded something called the Legal Neurodiversity Network, or LNN, back in 2023. It started as a small group of just 5 people, but it's grown tremendously since then.
That's remarkable. What do you think is driving this rapid growth? Is it just a trend, or is there a deeper need being addressed here?
I really think it speaks to a hunger for change within the legal profession. The LNN provides a space for neurodivergent individuals and their allies to connect, share experiences, and advocate for greater inclusion. It's recognizing that neurodiversity isn't just a personal issue, but a systemic one that requires a collective action.
So it's not just about warm, fuzzy feelings. There's a strategic element to this as well.
Precisely. Firms are realizing that by embracing neurodiversity, they're not just doing the right thing ethically, they're also gaining a competitive edge. Neurodivergent individuals often have unique cognitive strengths, things like attention to detail, pattern recognition, or out-of-the-box thinking, which are incredibly valuable in a legal context.
So instead of fitting everyone into the same mold, they're recognizing the power of that cognitive diversity. But let's get back to Freshfields and James's role in all of this. The case study also mentions his involvement in something called the Buckland Review. What is that about?
So the Buckland Review was a UK government review focused specifically on autism employment. James was instrumental in getting both the LNN and Freshfields involved in this review, bringing together stakeholders from across the legal sector to address this underrepresentation of autistic individuals in the workforce.
So they're thinking beyond their own walls, trying to influence systemic change across the whole industry. But what about internally at Freshfields? What are some concrete steps the NWG is taking?
They have a three-pronged approach: raising awareness, building community, and advocating for both neurodivergent individuals and parents of neurodivergent children. They've created bespoke neurodiversity training programs for their staff, which is fantastic. It goes beyond that surface-level awareness.
Right, because simply knowing what neurodiversity is doesn't automatically translate into understanding how to create a truly inclusive environment. What else are they doing beyond these training programs?
They've established dedicated support groups where employees can connect and share experiences. That sense of community is so important, especially in a high-pressure environment like a law firm. And they've also taken steps to make their offices more accessible.
So what kind of changes are we talking about here? Is it just adding ramps and wider doorways?
It goes beyond the purely physical changes. They're thinking about sensory overload, providing quiet spaces for those who need to take a break from stimulation, offering flexible work arrangements to accommodate individual needs. They're also incorporating neuro-inclusive best practices into their recruitment and interviewing processes.
Now that's an area where I could see neurodivergent individuals facing some significant challenges. The traditional interview format can be quite stressful, unpredictable, relying heavily on social cues and rapid-fire questions.
You're absolutely right, and Freshfields recognizes this. They're offering alternative interview formats, like video introductions and pre-interview information packets, to create a more level playing field, recognizing that talent can be shown in many different ways, and they're adjusting their processes accordingly.
This is all sounding incredibly positive, but some might argue that focusing on neurodiversity is a niche thing, that it only caters to a small segment of the population. How would you respond to that?
It's an important point. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, this spectrum of neurodiversity. We all fall somewhere on that spectrum, each with our own unique cognitive strengths and challenges. What benefits neurodivergent individuals often benefits everyone.
So it's not about special treatment, it's about creating a more humane and accommodating workplace for everyone.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just making adjustments. It's about fostering that culture of empathy and understanding, where everyone feels valued and respected.
Speaking of those concrete changes, the case study mentions a significant update to Freshfields' private health offering, which has a direct impact on neurodivergent individuals and their families.
Yes, and this is where it gets really personal. Freshfields now includes pathways to diagnosis for neurodivergent conditions.
Yeah.
As part of their private health benefits package, this is huge, especially considering those notoriously long wait times for an NHS diagnosis.
It's one thing to talk about inclusion, but it's quite another to actually invest in resources that make a difference in people's lives. They even shared an example of an employee whose child was able to get a diagnosis within 6 weeks, using the firm's private health care, after waiting over a year through the NHS.
That's powerful, a real testament to Freshfields' commitment. They're not just paying lip service, they're making real changes that benefit their employees.
Okay, so it can't be all sunshine and roses, right?
Oh.
Are there any downsides to Freshfields' approach or potential challenges?
Of course, it's not about pretending everything is perfect. One challenge they might face is ensuring these initiatives are truly embedded in the firm's culture and not seen as just add-ons or box-ticking exercises. There's also the risk of tokenism, showcasing a few neurodivergent individuals, but failing to address the deeper systemic barriers that still exist.
So it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Precisely. Ongoing commitment, constant evaluation, and a willingness to adapt and evolve as needed.
It's about recognizing that this is a journey, not a destination. There's always more to learn, more to do, but it seems like Freshfields is off to a pretty impressive start.
They are, and what's really encouraging is they're not alone. The LNN is expanding rapidly, influencing other firms and pushing for systemic change across the legal profession. We'll delve deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive.
So we've been talking about Freshfields and the LNN's efforts to champion neurodiversity in the legal profession, but it's not just about representation. It's about understanding how these different ways of thinking can actually benefit legal practice. Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. Imagine a really complex legal case. That needs meticulous attention to detail, the ability to see patterns in a ton of data, and even maybe a fresh approach to problem solving.
All areas where neurodivergent individuals can excel. For example, someone with autism might be amazing at reviewing contracts, catching inconsistencies others would miss.
Exactly. And someone with ADHD might thrive in fast-paced litigation, where their ability to hyper-focus and think on their feet becomes an asset. It's about recognizing that neurodiversity isn't just about ticking boxes. It's about using their strengths to really enhance the quality of legal work.
It's like building a dream team of legal superheroes, each with their own unique superpower. But let's be realistic. Even with the best intentions, initiatives in place, there are still challenges that neurodivergent individuals might face in a traditional law firm environment.
Oh, you're right. We talked about the interview process, but the challenges go beyond that. Think about the long hours, the intense pressure, the often chaotic and unpredictable nature of legal work. That can be really demanding for anyone, but especially for those who are sensitive to sensory overload, or those who do better in a more structured, predictable environment.
So how can law firms address those challenges, create a more supportive and inclusive environment for neurodivergent employees?
Well, Freshfields is taking steps in the right direction. They provide quiet spaces for employees to take a break from that sensory stimulation. They're offering flexible work arrangements, allowing people to work from home or adjust their hours.
That flexibility is key, isn't it? It's about recognizing that one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, and it's about being proactive, not just waiting for employees to ask for help, creating a culture where people feel comfortable being open about their needs, knowing that they'll be supported.
This all goes back to the idea of vulnerable leadership, right? When leaders are open about their own struggles, it creates a ripple effect. It gives others permission to be themselves.
Yeah, it's about moving away from that stiff upper lip, which is so common in law, creating a more human, more empathetic workplace.
But honestly, there are still misconceptions and biases surrounding neurodiversity. What are some of the most common ones you've seen?
One of the biggest is that it's binary. You're either neurodivergent or you're not. But the reality is that it's a spectrum, and we all fall somewhere on that spectrum. We have our own cognitive profiles.
It's like saying you're either tall or short.
Exactly. Another misconception is that neurodivergent individuals are all the same. They all have the same needs and preferences. This couldn't be further from the truth. Just like anyone else, neurodivergent individuals are diverse in their strengths, challenges, and personalities.
So it's about treating each person as an individual, not putting them into a category.
Precisely. And that takes ongoing education, open communication, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions and biases.
So for companies just starting to think about neurodiversity and inclusion, what advice would you give them? Where do they even begin?
The first step is easy. Listen to your employees. Find out what their needs and challenges are. Don't make assumptions. Create a space where people feel safe to be open and honest.
It's about creating that psychological safety, that sense of trust.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment. Try different things. See what works. There's no one-size-fits-all.
Be flexible, adaptable, and willing to learn.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the power of small changes, like providing noise-canceling headphones or a quiet space can make a big difference for someone sensitive to sensory overload.
It's about recognizing that inclusion isn't just grand gestures. It's about the little things that make a more welcoming and supportive environment. So we've talked a lot about the big picture, but I want to hear more about specific initiatives Freshfields has implemented. The case study mentioned some changes to their recruiting.
Right, they made some really interesting changes to the process to make it more accessible and less stressful for neurodivergent candidates. For example, they offer the option of a video introduction instead of that traditional cover letter.
That's a great idea. For some people, articulating their skills and experience in writing can be really tough, especially under pressure. Video allows them to show their personality and passion in a more natural way.
Yeah. And they also provide more information about the interview process beforehand. This helps reduce anxiety and lets candidates prepare better.
That's so important. It levels the playing field and gives everyone a fair shot. But what about after someone's hired? What support does Freshfields offer to neurodivergent employees?
They have a whole range of things, like access to mentors, support groups, and specialized training programs. They're also trying out a new program that pairs neurodivergent employees with neurotypical buddies to provide support and guidance.
That's brilliant. It creates a built-in support system and helps foster a sense of community and belonging. It's clear Freshfields is putting a lot of thought and effort into a truly inclusive environment. But beyond the practical steps, what do you think is the key to their success?
I think it's their commitment to seeing neurodiversity as a strength, not a deficit. They're not just doing this because it's the right thing to do. They recognize the value that neurodivergent individuals bring to the table.
It's about recognizing those unique talents and perspectives, creating a space where those talents can flourish.
Exactly. And that message goes far beyond the legal field. It's a message that every company, every organization, every individual should embrace.
It's a message that can transform not just workplaces, but society as a whole. Speaking of transformation, what does the future hold for neurodiversity in the workplace? What trends and developments are you seeing?
I think we're going to see a shift toward recognizing and valuing neurodiversity as a strength. Hopefully, more companies will follow Freshfields' lead and make those changes to create more inclusive workplaces.
And as awareness grows, I hope we'll move away from that one-size-fits-all approach to a more individualized and personalized approach to supporting employees.
Absolutely. And I think technology is going to play a big role in this. There are so many assistive technologies available that can help neurodivergent individuals thrive in the workplace.
Like noise-canceling headphones. Or software programs that can help with organization and time management.
Exactly. And I think we'll see even more innovation in the coming years.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities, but technology is just a tool. The human element is what's truly transformative. It's about changing mindsets, breaking down stereotypes, creating that culture of empathy and understanding.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing we all have something unique to offer, regardless of how our brains are wired.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I'd say it's this. Neurodiversity is not a deficit, it's a difference. And those differences can be a source of strength and innovation.
It's about embracing those differences, recognizing the value that each person brings to the table. But that's not just at the organizational level, is it? It's something we can all do in our own lives.
That's a great point. It's about challenging our own assumptions, being open to new perspectives, treating everyone with respect and understanding.
And as we've seen with Freshfields and the LNN, those actions can have a ripple effect, creating positive change that goes beyond ourselves. As we've been talking about Freshfield's approach and this broader impact of the LNN, it really strikes me that they're doing more than just policies and programs.
Yeah, I agree. They're tapping into something deeper,
Yeah.
like a shift in how we see difference itself.
Yeah, it's like challenging that idea of a normal brain, saying, hey, there's no one size fits all, everyone's different, and that's a good thing.
And that's what really drives inclusion. It's not just accommodating different needs. It's recognizing and valuing those differences as strengths.
And celebrating those unique perspectives and talents that neurodivergent people bring. We've talked about the benefits for businesses and the legal profession, but it's important to remember this goes beyond just professional success.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's about human dignity, creating a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued.
It's about belonging, not just at work, but in society as a whole. But how do we get there? How do we go from just awareness to action? From knowing about neurodiversity to actually making a more inclusive world?
It starts with us, in our own lives, challenging our own biases, educating ourselves and others, and advocating for change when we see it's needed.
It's about having those tough conversations, speaking up when things aren't right,
Yeah.
and being willing to get out of our comfort zones.
And it's about listening, truly listening to the experiences of neurodivergent people. Their stories can change minds, break down stereotypes, and help us understand each other better.
We talk a lot about empathy, but how do we go beyond just feeling it to taking action? How do we turn that feeling into real change?
It's about moving from understanding to actually being an ally, using our voices to support those who are often ignored, using whatever privilege we have to fight for a fairer world.
And remembering that this is a journey, there will be bumps along the way, but fighting for inclusion is worth it. It's something we all have to commit to.
It's like James Smither. He started with just 5 people and created a movement. That's now changing the legal profession and beyond.
Proof that even small things can have a huge impact when they're driven by passion and a purpose.
It is. It reminds us that we can all make a difference. We may not all start global networks or change company policies, but we can all be more inclusive, understanding, and compassionate.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on neurodiversity, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge. What's one small thing you can do today to make your own life more inclusive?
It could be simple, like learning about a specific neurodivergent condition, reaching out to someone different from you, or speaking up when you see exclusion.
Whatever it is, remember that even little things can make a difference, and those ripples can spread further than you think.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some new ideas and inspired you to embrace the power of neurodiversity.
Keep diving deeper, keep exploring, and keep pushing for a world where everyone can thrive.